We're going to show you some reports from our country contacts, from Kerry Bross and Diane Post from the United States, Jill Owens from New Zealand, and Samantha Brown from Canada, telling us the latest news in their respective countries.
Hello, everyone. This is Kerry reporting from the U.S. Over the weekend, board member Irene Lawrence and several other WDI USA volunteers joined a broad coalition of organizations, including Partners for Ethical Care, LGBT Courage Coalition, Our Duty, DIAG, LGB Alliance USA, and Wolf, for a peaceful public action during the annual American Academy of Pediatrics conference held in Orlando, Florida. The coalition advocates that the AAP stop medicalizing kids in light of the Cass review and the lack of scientific evidence supporting the safety or effectiveness of so-called gender-affirming care. One highlight was when lesbian activist Lauren Legary disrupted Admiral Levine's keynote speech by calling out the following: "Why did you pressure WPATH to remove age restrictions? How does that help children? Most gender non-conforming kids grow up to be gay. Stop transing gay kids. You are all complicit in homosexual conversion." Moving on, last week, 22 attorneys general signed a letter to the American Academy of Pediatrics warning the Medical Association that its statements supporting gender medical interventions for children are deceptive and may violate states' consumer protection laws. The letter asks the AAP to substantiate its claim that puberty blockers are reversible and to provide information on its communications surrounding its gender medicine guidance. On the 25th, Kelsey Bollard, director of IW Features, the storytelling platform at Independent Women's Forum, provided expert testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee, Subcommittee on Criminal Justice and Counterterrorism, at a hearing titled "Sexual Assault in U.S. Prisons, 2 Decades After the Prison Rape Elimination Act." In her 5-minute testimony, Bollard shared real stories of female inmates who've been physically and psychologically abused by policies that allow men to transfer to women's prisons. These stories and numerous others are highlighted in IW Features' Cruel and Unusual Punishment series. As first reported by Outkick and later discussed by Kara in her Substack post, Brooke Slusser, a current teammate of deluded male athlete Blair Fleming on the undefeated San Jose State women's volleyball team, has joined 16 other female athletes in suing the NCAA for Title IX violations. In the class action suit, Gaines et al. Versus NCAA et al., first filed in March, plaintiffs alleged discrimination under Title IX in the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Brooke, the starting setter and co-captain of SGSU's team, says she was forced both to compete and to share a residence with Fleming without any prior notice that the athlete was male. Additionally, Icons and Outkick broke the news over the weekend that Boise State women's volleyball refused to play against a team with a male player, becoming the first Mountain West Conference team to withdraw from a matchup against SJSU and the second team this season. While BSU did not specify their reason for forfeiting the match, Outkick noted that the decision came after Icons penned a letter urging the Mountain West Conference and schools under the conference to step up and defend women from the potential risks of competing against men and save women's rights under Title IX. And finally, yesterday, a judge in Georgia's Fulton County struck down the state's 6-week abortion ban, making the procedure legal up to 22 weeks of pregnancy. The ban was signed into law by Republican Governor Brian Kemp in 2019, but didn't take effect until July 2022, after it faced a legal challenge and the US Supreme Court's reversal of Roe versus Wade. In his ruling, Judge Robert McBurney wrote that a review of our higher court's interpretations of liberty demonstrates that liberty in Georgia includes in its meaning, in its protections, and in its bundle of rights, the power of a woman to control her own body, to decide what happens to it and in it, and to reject state interference with her health care choices. Hopefully the law will stand. Thank you.
Well, over 213 people signed a resolution that was submitted to the NOW conference. At first, it had been submitted to the conference in July and was never voted on. So that meant it went to the board. So it went to the board in the most recent meeting on last Saturday. 213 people had signed this petition, and what the petition said was that in communications from NOW, the National Organization for Women in the United States, we should not use demeaning terms for women like uterus possessors or menstruators, or refer to our body parts or processes to describe women and refuse to use the word woman. So that was the resolution, was to not do that and to actually refer to women as women. Many of the comments that were made in addition to signing this petition said exactly that this was degrading and humiliating, and how could NOW turn its back on women to support an ideology? Well, it went to the board, and initially it passed by a 3-2 vote. And unfortunately, the management did not like that result. And so they insisted on a roll call vote and that no one could abstain. 3 people had abstained in the original vote. So then the vote changed to 4-4. One woman said she'd made a mistake, or we had 4-3, and then it changed to 4-4. She said she had made a mistake. And so then they insisted on the roll call vote, and now we lost 3-6. So NOW has said they will continue to refer to women by demeaning terms using women's body parts and processes rather than referring to us as women. I think this is absolutely unacceptable from a so-called women's groups, and it is really a degradation of what NOW has stood for all of these years. And I will be, of course, leaving that organization. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou, I'm Jill Evans from New Zealand. Just following on with the hate crime material that Sam just shared. In New Zealand, the Law Commission has been asked to look into the issue of hate crimes. But already there was an article yesterday in one of our newspapers, which I'll put the link in, about the police who already record what they call hate crimes, most of which are in relation to race or ethnicity. But interestingly, in the data, it shows that there were 123 incidents recorded in the first 6 months of this year in relation to gender identity. And they regarded the rainbow crossing on Karangahape Road, which was vandalised by 3 individuals, as being a hate-motivated crime. So that was news to us. On the subject of puberty blockers, they made the news in New Zealand just recently in our mainstream media, which is quite unusual. And that's because there has been a research project based on our Pharmac, which produces the medications or distributes the medications rather. It has collected data since 2011 on puberty blockers. And so in 2011, new guidelines were issued, and at the time there were 50 young people who were prescribed puberty blockers. They excluded anyone under 12 so as to exclude anyone who was getting the puberty blockers for the purposes of precocious puberty, so that they're all likely to be related to gender dysphoria. So anyway, between 2014 and 2022, the number increased sharply to 400 kids on puberty blockers. And I'm just looking at the article. They have stopped increasing at that rate. But the thing is that is far higher than the rates in anywhere over Europe or the UK. And they've got all the percentages there. It's quite alarming. But I'll give you an example of what the medical profession are saying about this. So Dr. Rona Carroll, who's a GP and senior lecturer at the University of Otago, she says that the reason is it's not because the number of transgender young people is increasing. Instead, the higher prescribing rates may be because young people feel safe expressing their gender and healthcare needs, have access to appropriate health services, and live in a country where inclusion and respect for transgender individuals is growing. And she went on to say that our model of care in New Zealand is different from the centralised gender clinic model used in the comparison countries, which often led to excessively long wait times for care. Our goal should not be to match UK prescribing rates, but rather to ensure that gender diverse children and young people receive accessible, individualised and holistic care. The Pharmac data in this paper suggests New Zealand's responding to this need. So here we were celebrating that the issue of puberty blockers had finally made it into the mainstream media, but you can see that was not the only GP who was quoted in that article along similar lines. So that was rather disappointing. The other things that's been happening in the past week, one is that there is going to be a de-cult conference in Christchurch. And it's predominantly, we thought, oh, that would be good if they look at the gender cult. But unfortunately, the only speaker who we know is in relation to that issue is a doctor who, with the gender clinic for young people in Christchurch, Dr. Sue Bagshaw, and she's a well-known, very strong advocate of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. So goodness knows what sort of cult she's going to be talking about. Mostly it seems to be religious people, Jehovah's Witnesses and so on, brethrens. But interesting that the issue of cults is going to be debated in this conference. And finally, we've sent off a press release from the Women's Rights Party yesterday because there has been, and I've reported to you before about the Midwifery Council's scope of practice, which defines the role of the midwife, but failed to mention or took out any mention of women and babies from the scope of practice. One of the issues that has been raised is their appropriation of the Māori language to hide their cover, as a cover for their trans agenda. Anyway, two people from Manawahini Korero, which is an Indigenous organisation that opposes the transgender movement, they spoke at the petitions committee about a petition to do with this. And although normally the videos of those submissions are made publicly available, their one has been suppressed. And it turns out it's because a well-known, we call him a hate warrior, who's called Paul Thistle. You may have seen him on Twitter. He has made a complaint to the Speaker of the House because one of the women from Manawahini Korero was wearing a wahine, that's woman, equals adult human female t-shirt within the precincts of Parliament. And apparently that's not allowable. It's not allowable in any public service workplace either, apparently. News to us. And a former MP says that if anyone in the past has worn that t-shirt in our Parliament, they've been told to take it off. So I put out a press release saying, I hope they had something over the top of their bra when they were told to strip their t-shirt off. Anyway, so that's so I'll put those links up for you, and that's it from New Zealand this week.
Hello from Canada. In recent Canadian news, there was a debate in the House of Commons last Monday on Bill C-63, which is commonly known as the Online Harms Act. This is a Trojan horse bill that purports to keep children safe from online predators and bullying. The problem is that it also introduces legislation and amends existing legislation to redefine what constitutes a hate crime and hate speech, and increase punishments for those who are found guilty of such offenses. While most people would agree that crimes motivated by hate should carry steeper punishments, the vast majority of Canadians are unaware of what the Canadian government now considers to be hate. The bill would create a new definition of hatred, which they call hate propaganda offenses. The definition specifies that hatred involves detestation or vilification and does not mean disdain or dislike. But the problem here for Canadian feminists is that with gender identity being a protected characteristic, it's unclear whether or not pointing out the reality of things like autogynephilia and the link between cross-dressing and sexual predation constitute vilification. The bill specifically does mention that our charter rights can be overridden to protect against hate. It's important to note here, just to give an idea of what they're considering hate. The CAHN, who are the Canadian Anti-Hate Network and are heavily funded by the Canadian government, released a document in August with a list of what they are calling far-right hate groups. The very first organization listed is CEDAW, or Canadian Women's Sex-Based Rights. WDI Canada works regularly with CEDAW, and they are absolutely not far-right or a hate group. They are a nonpartisan group of women, mostly feminists, who are working to fight back against the harm gender ideology has caused in Canada. One has to wonder if their 7 issues postcards, which highlight 7 sex-based issues affecting women and girls, would fall into the very vague definition of hate propaganda in this proposed legislation. It's also worth noting that the list that the CAHN released also included neo-Nazi skinhead groups. So a government-funded organization has officially put gender-critical women's groups on the same list as skinheads. One of the most concerning parts of the debate to watch was when Liberal MPs were questioned on the punishments proposed in the legislation, which include everything from peace bonds that involve house arrest and prohibit social media use to steep prison sentences. When questioned on this, the answer given was basically that judges can be trusted not to be too heavy-handed in their sentencing. This is concerning, considering that Canada is full of incredibly progressive judges, including people like Supreme Court Justice Sheila Martin, who stated that a victim in a rape trial should be referred to as a vagina owner, despite the fact that the victim did not even identify as trans and was referred to as she throughout the trial. There's one more part of the bill I'll mention here. If an individual makes a complaint of hate speech aimed at them specifically, the offender could be made to pay compensation of not more than $20,000 to any victim personally identified in the communication that constituted the discriminatory practice. I can't help but think of the reactions many women have had both online and offline to men like Faye Johnstone and Kai Cheng Tom, for instance, who gave keynote speeches at memorials for the Montreal Massacre, using the events to complain of transmisogyny and transgenocide. Many Canadian women pointed out the audacity of these men and the fact that they had no business being there because they are men. Faye would be just the type to keep tabs and make discrimination complaints against women. He has stated himself that he wants TERFs to be so vilified that we wouldn't dare speak our minds publicly. Sadly, feminists are not protected under prohibited grounds for discrimination, so he would face no punishment for his open hatred and vilification of women. The Conservatives did offer an alternative to this bill entitled Bill C-412 that they say would achieve the goal of keeping kids safe without limiting free speech and trampling on our charter rights. The Liberals were unreceptive to this option. I'm hoping there's going to be more discussion on that bill the next time that they debate. In other news, Eva Karlova of COSBAR gathered all of the prison data available from different years and countries and found that they all paint the same picture, a picture that is unlikely to shock any of the women here. About half of all trans-identified men in prison are sex offenders. And that's, she gathered from as far as New Zealand, UK, Canada, the US, all over. Finally, Canadian women will be gathering in Ottawa and possibly in other Canadian cities on November 1st to protest the new self-ID laws coming to effect in Germany. We're encouraging any women in the Ottawa area to join us at the German embassy on November 1st, or to find the consulate in their area to protest there. And that's all from Canada today. Thank you.